The last choice. The evacuation alarm screamed through Helios 24 like a living thing, a sound that turned bone to water and thought to chaos. Aaron Hale felt it vibrate through the metal floor beneath his boots, felt it in his chest, felt it in the way his hands suddenly wouldn't stop shaking. Around him, officers and alien crew moved with the practiced urgency of people who had trained for this moment 100 times, the moment when the station decided to die. Reactor Cascade Protocol. Everyone knew the drill. 17 minutes to critical failure. 43 seconds per deck to reach the emergency pods. The math was simple. The math was merciless. Aaron moved with the crowd, his technician's vest fluttering as people shouldered past him toward the main stairwell. Beside him, Commander Veldar, six-limbed, iridescent, and moving with the terrifying grace of something born to vacuum, gestured with two arms while barking orders through a translation implant. All personnel to evacuation stations. Secure the data cores. Leave nothing that can. The commander's voice cut off as another tremor ran through the station, and somewhere above them, something heavy fell with the sound of screaming metal. Aaron grabbed the handrail. His eyes were on the floor indicator. Deck 7. Deck 6. They were moving up, toward the pods, toward safety. This was what you did. This was what everyone did. But as they passed the sealed administrative corridor on Deck 5, Aaron saw something that stopped his breath. A service screen still glowed with activity, the deep-level inventory system. And on that screen, highlighted in red, was a manifest he shouldn't have been able to see: Cargo Sublevel B, Life Support, Critical. Occupancy, 73 Rai. Status, No evacuation alert transmitted. He stopped walking. Around him, people flowed past like water around a stone. No one noticed. The commander was 3 levels above already, counting heads, checking her equipment. Aaron's fingers trembled as he stared at the screen. 73 of them. The small ones. The insect-like workers from the agricultural sector, the ones who made the hydroponics run, who tended the bioreactors, who barely ever left the lower decks. Their species' ears didn't register the standard evacuation frequency. There had been a memo about that. A memo that had gotten filed and forgotten in the chaos of the crisis rotation. 17 minutes to critical failure. Aaron thought about his daughter, Sarah. Thought about what he would want someone to do if she was 73 times over, trapped in the dark, wondering why everyone was leaving. Thought about the weight of that choice sitting in his chest like a stone. He turned away from the stairwell. It took 30 seconds for anyone to notice. By then he was already moving down, his badge still functional, his hands still steady. The stairwell behind him filled with distant voices, people calling his name. He didn't stop. He couldn't stop. The math had changed. It wasn't 17 minutes anymore. It was maybe 10. Maybe less. The lower decks were wrong. Quiet in a way that made your skin crawl. The emergency lights cast everything in shades of red and amber, and the tremors came more frequently now, each one feeling like the station was taking shallow, panicked breaths. Aaron's boots echoed as he ran. The air tasted like overheated circuits and fear. Sublevel B's main entrance was sealed, an iris lock designed to hold against decompression. Aaron's badge got him through the outer door, but the inner gate wouldn't respond. He hit the emergency release. Nothing. He could hear the Rai then, a sound like wind chimes in distress, their voices carrying a pitch human ears could barely register. They knew something was wrong. They could feel it the way animals feel earthquakes. Aaron pulled a maintenance panel and started working. His hands remembered the schematics even as his mind screamed that time was dissolving. 10 minutes. Maybe 8 now. He found the manual override, a physical lever buried beneath 3 layers of safety protocols. His palms were sweating so badly he could barely grip it. It took all his strength. When the seal finally cracked open, a breath of recycled air hit his face, and the sound of the Rai grew louder. The cargo bay beyond was vast and complex, filled with the gentle architecture of their hive pods, structures that looked grown rather than built, all curves and careful geometry. And there, clustered near the central air duct, were the workers. Dozens of them, smaller than Aaron's torso, with segmented bodies that caught the red emergency light like jewels. Their antennae waved frantically. Their compound eyes tracked his movement with hope and terror braided together. "Follow me," Aaron said, knowing they wouldn't understand the words but hearing his own voice shake anyway. "Come on. Now. Please." It worked, or maybe they understood something in his tone that translated across species and language. They moved toward him, a tide of chittering, clicking life, and Aaron turned and ran, praying they would follow, praying the route he chose wouldn't collapse on top of them, praying that the sealed launch bay on the opposite side of the station could still be reached. The tremors came faster now. Harder. Emergency lights flickered and died and came back online. The walls wept sparks. Behind him, the Rai moved with surprising speed, their bodies designed for running, and Aaron led them through corridors that felt like the throat of some vast, dying animal. Once, a ceiling panel fell just behind them. Once, he had to squeeze through a partially sealed bulkhead door and pull the smallest of the Rai through on the other side. Once, he looked at his chronometer and saw that he'd been wrong about the math. They had maybe 4 minutes left. The launch bay was still functional, but it was sealed. Of course it was sealed. Only Command had access codes for the emergency bays. Aaron could see through the observation window, a cargo pod, old and dented, still mounted on the launch rack. His access code was low-level. It wouldn't work on this door. He grabbed a fire extinguisher from the wall and smashed the control panel. Sparks showered down. Once. Twice. On the third impact, something in the lock mechanism snapped. The door hissed open. The Rai surged toward the pod, their instincts screaming at them to get inside, to find sealed walls and life support. Aaron ran to the launch controls, a physical console, thank God, not entirely automated. His fingers flew across the switches. Behind him, the workers poured into the cargo pod like water finding its level, their small bodies efficient and desperate. One of them had hurt its leg. Another was carrying what looked like a larvae pod, something precious and fragile. They didn't leave anyone behind. The station shook, and Aaron felt something give way deep in its bones. Not far. Not far away at all. He hit the launch sequence. The pod's door hissed shut. The magnetic locks began their cycle. 50 seconds to detach. 45. 40. And Aaron realized, with a clarity that felt almost peaceful, that his own escape pod was on the opposite side of the station. That the distance between here and there was collapsing into superheated debris. That he had made a choice and lived with it long enough to see it through. The cargo pod detached with a shudder that ran through the floor beneath his feet. Through the window, Aaron watched it fire its chemical thrusters and slide away from Helios 24, carrying with it every small, fragile worker that no one else had remembered to save. The breaking light. The reactor didn't explode. It unraveled. Commander Veldar stood on the observation deck of the rescue frigate Sentinel, watching Helios 24 come apart like a flower opening in fast motion, and felt something she had no word for in any of her species' 17 languages. The station had been her command for 5 years. Now it was becoming light, first a soft glow that turned nuclear orange, then white, then something that hurt to look at directly even through the polarized viewport. Behind her, the crew moved in stunned silence. The evacuation had succeeded. 43 souls retrieved. 43 souls saved. According to every protocol, every metric, every measure that mattered on official reports, this was a success. Everyone on the roster had been accounted for. Everyone on the manifest had been brought home. Then why did it feel like drowning? The communications officer, a young Kelthian with purple-blue skin and nervous hands, turned from his station, his antennae drooping. Commander, I'm receiving a transmission from the escape pod cluster. It's not on any of our manifests. A cargo pod. It's broadcasting distress codes and requesting docking instructions. Veldhar's entire body went still. In her species, stillness was a threat display. The officer actually took a step back. Repeat that. There's a cargo pod, ma'am. It detached from sublevel B approximately 4 minutes before core failure. It's carrying life signs. Many of them. Approximately 73 of them, according to the sensor read. There. Commander, they're Rai. Agricultural workers. They weren't on the evacuation roster. The commander moved to the communication terminal. How is that possible? Sublevel B was sealed. No evacuation alert was transmitted to that sector. Who had access to launch a pod? Checking the launch logs now, ma'am. The authorization came from, the officer's antennae drooped further. From Aaron Hale. The human technician. He accessed the launch sequence with emergency override protocols. Veldhar felt her chromatophores shift, a flash of color she couldn't quite control. Aaron Hale. The quiet technician who had been assigned to the station for equipment maintenance. The one who brought coffee to the late-night shifts and knew the name of every crew member on the station, even the temporary contractors. The one who was supposed to be on the evacuation roster but whose pod had launched empty. Find him, Veldhar said. Check the escape pods. Check everything. Commander, we've already accounted for all evacuation pods. His pod, it never launched. According to the manifest, he left the primary assembly point at Deck 7, 1447 station time. He was flagged as missing at 1451, but given the cascade protocols and evacuation priorities, the status was logged as presumed casualty when the evacuation completed. The words hung in the air like radiation. Like poison. Like a truth that couldn't be unsaid. Veldhar's eyes went to the viewport, where Helios 24 was still burning. Still coming apart. Still beautiful in the way that violence could be beautiful if you didn't think too hard about what you were actually seeing. On the medical deck, the Rai workers were being brought aboard on stretchers and in carefully adapted containment fields. They were small and fragile-boned, the kind of beings that looked delicate until you understood that they were built for a life of constant motion and work. Several of them had injuries, burns, radiation exposure, trauma. But they were alive. All 73 of them were alive because one human had made a choice that the rest of the galaxy didn't even know it needed made. Dr. Ishara, a Velian physician with compassionate eyes and 3-fingered hands, was running the emergency intake. She looked up when Veldhar entered the medical bay, and her expression shifted from professional focus to something deeper, something like understanding. Commander. You've heard. How did he do it? Veldhar asked. How did he launch them? The pod records show evidence of manual override. He would have had to defeat the automated safety systems, align the launch rack, and manually input sequences that normally require command-level authorization. With the time constraints and station degradation, it would have been nearly impossible. But he did it. He did it, Dr. Ishara confirmed. And then he didn't leave. The records are clear. After the cargo pod launched, he moved back into the station. Toward the reactor sector. Veldhar turned away, unable to watch the medical team work. Unable to watch these small creatures, these forgotten workers, being saved when the one who had saved them was now part of the debris orbiting what used to be their home. The sensor array picked up the shock wave first. A ripple of particles and radiation that made every screen flare white for an instant. Helios 24's final moment. The commander watched it happen on the displays, and she understood something she had never needed to understand before, that heroism didn't always look like triumph. Sometimes it looked like sacrifice. Sometimes it looked like a human technician walking deeper into fire so that others could walk toward light. What the galaxy learned. The story spread differently than Veldar expected it to. She had prepared official reports. Clear, detailed, emotionless accounts of the evacuation, the retrieval of the Rai workers, and the presumed casualty status of Aaron Hale. The reports were filed according to protocol. They were then, somehow, leaked to 3 different news feeds within 12 hours. What started as a footnote in a report became a headline. What became a headline became a conversation. Within 48 hours, the story had traveled across the Orion Arm and was being discussed in transmission delays on colony worlds and observation stations that had never heard of Helios 24. The human who went back. The human who died so that the forgotten could live. On the Rai homeworld, a memorial was erected in a language that looked like liquid geometry and sounded like wind. They called him the guardian of the threshold. In their culture, it was the highest honor a non-Rai could receive. The Kelthian philosophers debated for months about what it meant. What it said about human nature that Aaron had made the choice he made. Some argued it was irrational, that no species that survived this long could be fundamentally wired to run toward danger. Others countered that perhaps humanity's survival wasn't despite this impulse, but because of it. That a species willing to burn itself to light the way for others might be exactly the kind of species the galaxy needed. Commander Veldar never forgot the evacuation. She never forgot the moment she realized that one of her crew, a human, warm-blooded and mortal and fragile, had walked into a dying star so that 73 beings whose names he probably didn't know could see another sunrise. She had trained her entire life to protect others. She had learned tactics and strategy and the mathematics of sacrifice. But she had never learned what it meant to choose that sacrifice in the moment, without hesitation, without reward, simply because the choice needed making. The Rai workers were released from quarantine and integrated into the colony stations of the Centauri sector. They spoke rarely about the evacuation, but sometimes, on the anniversary of the station's collapse, they would gather in their hive pods and produce a sound that human ears could barely detect. A frequency that carried memories. A sound like gratitude. A sound like grief for the one who had saved them. Years later, when human historians looked back on this moment, they would point to it as a turning point. Not in technology or politics or military capability, but in how other species understood humanity. The story of Aaron Hale became proof of something that had been theorized but never proven, that humans didn't fight to survive. They didn't scratch and claw their way through the galaxy like every other species. They fought for each other. They fought for strangers. They fought for the small and forgotten and left behind. They fought, sometimes, until there was nothing left to fight with except sacrifice itself. The memorial gardens on 17 different worlds grew flowers named after Aaron Hale, species that were delicate and beautiful and impossible to grow, and yet, somehow, they persisted. They bloomed even in hostile soil. They reached toward light they should never have been able to find. In a small apartment on Earth, a woman named Sarah hung a photograph on her wall. It showed her father in his technician's uniform, smiling at the camera with eyes full of ordinary kindness. Below the photograph, she placed a message carved into stone. He ran toward those who needed him. He ran until he had nothing left to run with. And the galaxy learned that love is not measured in years survived or heights climbed or empires built. Love is measured in the moment you turn away from safety because someone else is still in the dark. When the Rai scientists finally developed faster-than-light communication technology, one of the first messages they sent was to Earth. It said, simply, "Thank you for Aaron Hale. He taught us that some light is worth any darkness." And somewhere in the debris field where Helios 24 had been, in the quiet between stars, that message drifted on solar winds, eternal and unbroken, a reminder that the smallest choices can echo across the vast indifference of space and leave marks that will never fade.